This is GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 204, entitled Masculism. Flyer itself. Masculism. Masculism is men's lib. It does for men what feminism does for women. Masculism removes those things that oppress men, largely female financial parasitism, and a string of other legal discriminations against men, the largest one being the lack of a legislated paternity rejection right, equivalent to women's maternity rejection right, also known as aka abortion right. Women can reject an unwanted pregnancy, but men can't, and will have to pay for decades for an unwanted kid and have their lives ruined. Masculists label traditional women who expect to parasite off men's money as fluffies. Masculists refuse to have relationships with fluffies, forcing them to become FIPs, financially independent persons, warning robot males, that's traditional males who expect to be parasited upon by fluffy wives, rather a FIP than a fluffy. A fluffy will parasite on you before the divorce and after the divorce. Fluffies can rot on the shelf. Fluffies are parasites. Fluffies are immoral. Fluffies are slavers of men. Fluffies are vermin. Fluffies are to be wiped out. Fluffies can rot on the shelf. Masculists recognize that so many of men's problems stem from the existence of fluffies and fluffy feminists. Feminists have had their feminist consciousness raised, but not their masculist consciousness. They still have traditional fluffy attitudes when it comes to men. That is, they still see men as checkbooks, cash machines, who have to pay alimony and child support, even when, in the US, a divorced father will only get joint custody in 10% of cases. So many men have been financially massacred in the fluffy feminist-dominated divorce courts that a massive men's movement, masculists, MRAs, that's men's rights activists, MGTOWs, men going their own way, paying only for themselves and eschewing relationships with women, is causing millions of women, and especially misandrist, male-dumping feminists, to be left on the shelf. Millions of men simply refuse to have relationships with them. Marriage and kids are toxic. The divorce rate is 50%, and millions of men are learning that fluffies and fluffy feminists are to be avoided for the sake of their own male health and wealth. Look at Japan, where this male rebellion has developed furthest. The Japs are not a creative people. Their creativity scores are a standard deviation and a half lower than other materially advanced nations. It's therefore not surprising that their gender roles are half a century behind the West. Jap women will drop out of the workforce in 70% of cases after the first kid. A third of young Jap males under 30 now refuse to have relationships with women. They look at their fathers who worked 11-hour days, 3-hour commutes, who got home so late they orphaned their kids, who handed over their paychecks to their fluffy wives, who played tennis and cards with their fluffy friends. These young men are appalled and refuse to adopt the same gender role and look on young fluffy women as toxic parasites to be avoided. Masculists are political. They're angry. They harangue fluffy feminists, the third wave type, who have moved on beyond second wave feminism, which was about equal rights, to third wave feminism, which is about genocracy. That is, for example, the fluffy feminist takeover of the divorce courts and the financial massacring of millions of men. Masculists get on the media and educate young men not to marry, don't have kids, avoid fluffies like the plague. Masculists destroy the reputations on the media of fluffy feminists and male feminist politicians who go along with the fluffy feminist agenda of genocracy. 10 years from now, there will be such a shortage of traditional robot males that today's fluffy feminists will be declaring themselves anti-feminists so they can be more competitive with the millions of other fluffies all competing with the dwindling supply of robot males so that they can exploit them to rob them of their money in the divorce courts. In short, The 2010s is the decade of male rebellion. It's the decade of the masculists and MGTOWs who refuse the traditional robot male role of paying for women. Soon, there'll be so many millions of masculists and MGTOWs that any woman who gets the reputation of being a fluffy in her social circle will be given the kiss of death in terms of her getting a man. No masculist or MGTOW will go near her. They will see her as toxic and will cause her to rot on the shelf. Masculists push the idea that men are the superior sex based on scientific findings. Men outperform women on virtually any scientific criterion you choose. Men have a 10% higher IQ variance than women, so it's to be expected that 99% of science Nobel Prizes are won by men. Men have a much higher testosterone level than women, so are more aggressive, more ambitious, more persistent, and complete tough tasks better than women. Men build the world and invent everything. We are the superior sex and should be admired for that. We can do things women can't. For example, write symphonies, win Nobels, invent the transistor, the computer, build the skyscrapers. We make the world run. The only critical function women play in the world is to grow the next generation. But soon, male inventive genius will create sex robots that males will prefer to fuck rather than real women, and invent artificial wombs so that men can create their own babies without the toxic risk of the divorce courts controlled by fluffy feminist judges and lawyers. These divorce courts need to be purged by the masculists, as well as the fluffy feminist gender politicians who changed the divorce laws to favour women and to wipe out men financially. Men are waking up in their millions and getting very angry. God help women and politicians when men get collectively angry. A few weeks ago, I was at a meeting where a feminist was talking. She was dumping on men publicly to a mixed audience. It was obvious to me that she had never been confronted by an articulate, informed, very angry masculist before. I blew her away in a 10-minute tirade. She was utterly demolished, deeply, profoundly hurt, as I said to her that she was an example of the type of woman that masculists and MGTOWs first choose to reject, followed of course by the fluffies, who are the main enemy of the masculists. I turned to the audience and addressed myself to the young women in the audience and said that I pitied them because they would be the main victims of male rebellion. Men would simply not go near them if they were career incompetent fluffies. I told them about Japan. I could see from the reaction of these young women that they were truly shocked. There was a deathly silence after I finished my tirade. The masculist message had penetrated. It was clear to me that women are scared of the rise of male rebellion against the traditional robot male, slave to women role. They could see that they would have to be fips and pay their own way or be manless. That scared a lot of them, because so many of them are studying economically useless, career incompetent subjects. The talk was at a local university. Yeah, that was quite a while ago. Time passes. Feminism teaches women equal rights. Masculism teaches them equal obligations. That is, sharing the burden of earning the living with men and not parasiting on them. The heavy price that women are increasingly paying for dominating the fluffy feminist divorce courts is that men are simply refusing to marry, refusing to give women kids. Today, a third of young Jap men are doing this, and the West is going the same way. Soon it will be half of men. In fact, I think today in America and Japan it's now 2/3 of young men. Soon it'll be half of men, forcing women to adapt or be left rotting on the shelf. Soon, men in audiences will be literally throwing rotten tomatoes at fluffy feminists and angrily shouting them off the stage, and rightly so, because this is the decade of male rebellion. We are angry, we are fed up, we are militant. Cheers, Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis, profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website, profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Ciao.